There are two reports today suggesting that the Chinese have a new agreement with Cuba to set up a listening post in Cuba. Are those reports accurate?
I've seen that reporting. I can tell you based on the information that we have that is not accurate.
You're saying it's not accurate, that they're planning this?
I'm saying we've seen the report. It's not accurate.
I think you've heard my colleagues say this, and I'll say it again here. We've seen the reports. They're inaccurate.
After many in the Biden administration called reports of a China spy base in Cuba, quote, inaccurate, an official confirmed to Fox News yesterday that China is likely spying on us from Cuba, saying, quote, the People's Republic of China conducted an upgrade of its intelligence collection facilities in Cuba in 2019. This is well documented in the intelligence record. Here to react is former China strategist for the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, retired Air Force Brigadier General Robert Spalding. General, great to have you on the program this morning. I would love for you to help me understand the significance of this potential listening post or how long they've been spying on us from Cuba. It would be my impression that China, I would be unsurprised. I would be not shocked to find out China spying on us from anywhere and everywhere, General. I assume they're cyber, basically in every aspect of our society and in every one of our institutions at this point. So how significant or shocked should we be to understand they might be building a listening post in Cuba?
Well, it's not just about what's going on in our society. In Cuba, they'd be looking at and listening to what our military aircraft ships are doing out in the area of the Atlantic Ocean. So it is significant. It's a concern primarily because I believe that if they are to invade Taiwan, they're probably going to try to create some kind of distraction. And a good place to have a distraction is Cuba.
That makes sense. So more, and by the way, as a follow-up to that, then, you know, I guess I felt like or feel like information at this point is shared so readily online that most spying now is done through cyber hacking or cyber surveillance that I wonder what you can learn from a physical, for example, spy balloon or listening post somewhere on the east coast of America. But what you're telling me is still potential ears and eyes on military movements is valuable to China.
Certainly, they want to get an idea of how we might, operate when we're out at sea. And so this would be one of the ways that they would do that.
Okay. And then that leads us to this. I want to share with you a headline from Politico. The Pentagon is freaking out about a potential war with China, parentheses, because America might lose. This is in reference to one of the many war games that take place. Not all of them result in an American loss with China, but they're not in collectively, and I don't know how much value we should put in collectively. Each one of these war games has their own value or lack of value. But it's not a rosy picture in totality of a potential war between us and China. Is that accurate? You would be someone who would actually, I think, have some direct knowledge of these potential outcomes. Is that accurate? We shouldn't be too optimistic about a war with China.
Well, not only is it accurate, it's been accurate for a very long time. We've been losing war games against the Chinese for at least 10 years. And I think it's a singular lack of focus in Washington, D.C. about the problem of China. It's a lack of organization and focus on China as the chief threat. We're organized for a post-Cold War world, and we're in a Cold War. And that requires that we, organize the Department of Defense away from these ideas of regional commands and focus like we did during the first Cold War on China as a singular threat. It requires a focus on the things that we buy, the weapon systems. It requires a focus by the White House on China as an enemy and not trying to make China into a friend. So we have a lot of work to do, and we're not doing it.
Real quick, General, so when you say we've been losing war games for a better part of a decade with China, war carries a lot of weight there in what we're talking about. Are we talking about a war over Taiwan? Are we talking about a war in the South China Sea? We're talking about a war on the Chinese mainland, the American mainland. What type of war are we losing consistently for a decade?
Typically, when we war game, it is Taiwan. There have been some war games on the South China Sea, but it's primarily Taiwan. And I think, we recognize that the Chinese have built up a huge war chest on their side of the Taiwan Strait, and we've kind of been lax. And that's because we've been distracted by Russia and North Korea and Iran, and we haven't focused on China as a singular threat.
All right. Fascinating, if ominous, conversation this morning. Retired Brigadier General Robert Spalding. Thank you so much.
I'm Steve Ducey.
I'm Brian Kilmeade.
And I'm Ainsley Earhart. And click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis.